G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom Podcast.
He washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die." The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
Hello, we are the ChronicleChamber team, and this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and you can also contact us via our email, which is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us via YouTube, iTunes, or the various Android apps. Now, we were originally going to discuss something else, which we were quite excited about, but over the weekend we heard the sad news that Team Phantom and Phantom writer Claes Reimerthi sadly passed away, and so we had to change our minds. We had to change what we do, and we had to pay tribute to a man who has left such a huge impact on our lives, and also on the hero of the Phantom as well. So first of all, I hope all the family and all the friends and family, our thoughts and prayers are with you in this great loss. And what follows is a bit of a chat amongst four of us guys, and as we pay tribute to a person who has left a huge legacy. So my name is Jermayn, and today I am joined by not one, not two, but three guys. How are you all going?
Well, Jim, thank you.
Not too bad, Jerm. Saddened by the news, as you've said, and it's an absolute tragedy that someone so young, I'll say that, at the age of 66, it's far too young. And I know I'm supposed to be the old man of the group, and I'm closest to that age, but all of us can see it from where we are. So, it's too young. Only just retired, Claes, and unfortunately not getting the chance to enjoy his retirement. So sad news indeed.
Yeah, that's a real kicker. You retire, and all of a sudden this happens. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and but we wish all the best for his family at the moment.
And Mikael, as thank you for joining us. We wanted you on to be able to give us Claes does come from Sweden. You are our Sweden resident Chronicle Chamber, I guess you could call it. So how are you going? And thanks for joining us. And what were your thoughts when you heard the news?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's really sad because I met him a few times, and he's a great guy. And to the Phantom, I mean, the hero we all love, he has been huge, especially for the Team Phantom, but also for the dailies and Sundays. So
yeah,
it's a huge loss for the community, and of course a huge loss with a person that is too young. Yeah.
Now we do have an interview with Claes, which was done by Paul Andreas Johannesson. I believe it was maybe about a decade ago. Sadly, we never got a follow-up interview with that. It will always be one of my regrets. Now, also in our episode, in our Expand the Phantom podcast episode 110, so that's it's about 80 odd episodes ago. We had our top 20 Phantom influences. Now, Dan, you and I both had him in our top 10. That's how much we rated him. Stephen and Mikael, you weren't. I believe you gave us your top 20, but I don't believe we talked about it in the podcast. Would you rate him in your top 10 as well, for both of you?
Well, he'd have to be. His work speaks for itself. He's done close to 300 stories. His lack of a better word, his fingerprints are over stories that have permeated 3.5 decades. Is it? Did he start in the 80s or the 90s?
1984.
1984. So 3.5 decades. He's got to be in a top 10 in regards to important Phantom, or people important to publishing the Phantom, or writing the Phantom, or in the Phantom world. and he was part of the Brains Trust that helped that. Well, for lack of a better word, well, no, not, I'll just change another word. That guided Team Phantom in the 90s, and they really where they broke away from the newspaper to do their own thing, and that's still being felt today.
Hmm. So, what about you, Mikael? Would you have him in your top 10?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully remember how that episode was, but I think I already had a few Team Phantom. I think I had Ulf and Hans, and then basically wanted to spread it out a bit. But yeah, I mean, Claes is. Yeah, he should be there.
Yeah. I think I had him at 6. In looking at the list, I had him today. I had him at 6, and Dan had him at 8. So you know, so yeah, quite easily top 10. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little bit of a discussion, kind of go through the history of Claes, just to kind of touch base, kind of for those who are not fully aware of who he is or the influence that he has on our character. This will kind of give you a bit of an idea, and then we're going to have some fun, and we're going to discuss who he was, what we liked about his stuff, some stories that we liked, and Mikael, I would like you to share also some. You know, you've said that you've met him a couple of times as well, so you know, we'll take time out in the podcast as well for you to also share. But Dan or Stephen, do you just want to start us off and give us a little bit of history, and then we can kind of go from there?
Yeah, sure. I'll have a crack, and I'm sure Mikael will be able to pick me up on any factual details that I'm getting wrong from a lot of research on Phantom Wiki today, and really appreciate the guys who put that together and everyone who contributes financially to help keep that running, because it's a valuable resource certainly for us, and hopefully in a broader sense for the Phantom community. But from what I've been able to tell today, Claes was Claes or Klaus, Mikael? Klaus. Okay. So Klaus was born in 1955, as I suggested, age 66 when he passed. Started writing for Team Phantom, as we've said, in 1984, or started having stories published at that stage anyway. Tried to get some of his own comics up and going prior to that, from what I can gather, including as an artist, but really found his home as an author with Team Phantom, and published 61 stories under the name of Michael Thierres through the 1980s. So he wrote under that pseudonym for 9 years before the first story where he was credited as Claes Reimerthi was the election in Bengali story, which is interesting. I sort of raised my eyebrows when I came across that little tidbit, because that's such a pivotal moment in Team Phantom and history. And Stephen mentioned the Brains Trust. And so that was that period in 92, 93, 94, where Ulf Granberg was really getting Team Phantom together as a group to say, or the most powerful influences, whether it's the artists, the authors, and some of the editorial team coming together, sort of go, well, where are we going to take the Phantom from here? And perhaps that was with an eye on the fact that Lee Falk was getting on. That's only 5-7 years before Lee Falk died. So whether that was part of the plan for Ulf was to say, well, let's set an agenda, or let's set our future with the Phantom, planning for Lee Falk's passing. And by producing the very first story in that new sort of in that new sort of vein that Team Phantom was coming up with, Klaus, clearly set himself up as a pivotal writer and one of the most influential writers in that group. And history would say that he has gone on to be the credited author in another 270, 280 issues of Phantom. We would say he's written nearly 300 stories. A lot of his issues with Phantom were two-parters. He wrote quite a lot of 2, 4, even a 6-parter towards the end of his career with Nat Turner's Spirit. So he did love a long story. Quite famously wrote the 50-part Heart of Darkness series, which has been a bit hit and miss with through readers, unfortunately, because of the way that that's been presented, but was quite popular, as far as I can tell, Mikael, in Scandinavia and Sweden through the 1990s when it was being produced every week. And then went on to become editor of, and I'm not reading your script at all, sorry, Jim, but when you can go in and fill in any blanks I've missed. But then went on and was the head writer for Team Phantom for a little while, had all sorts of editorial control, and I haven't even talked about the bit where he was involved in the dailies and the Sundays.
15 times his stories have been voted as the best story for the year by Sweden, Norway, and Finland. If I remember correctly, we've put his stories in when we've been doing our polls, ranked quite highly, either top 3 or top 5. Don't think he's ever made top 1 of any of ours, but maybe he has. I can't quite remember. But Mikael might want to talk about his other Swedish comics.
Yeah, exactly. Before and during, he has written a lot of other things than Phantomen. In Swedish, he has written titles like Carrie Drake, Gauntlet of Fate, and comedy strips such as 91, that's like, in Sweden we have this mandatory military service, and this has been like, 91 has been one of these soldiers for 70 years or something. Lilla Fridolf, that's also a funny thing about this little man and his horrible wife, and they're making fun of each other basically. Sputnik, and comics books for small children like Bamse, that's like the strongest bear in the world, and it's a huge thing here in Sweden. It's one of the biggest comic books. And the historical graphical novel series about Gustav Vasa, which was the first real Swedish king that basically reformed Sweden. And he was also a comics scholar, and written several books and articles and reviews of comics and comic creators, and was a big part of this series. The comic book people. We have talked about it earlier with Magnus and those. Now the name just followed up, slipped out. Sorry.
So it's fair to say, Mikael, that he's not just a phantom writer. He's done a lot more than that. And would you say he's probably one of the most productive Swedish comic creators throughout the whole of your history?
Yeah, yeah, that might be true. I mean, he has done a lot of things and a lot of issues. Not just the width, but also like the amount.
Yeah. Now, just a couple of things I want to make mention, just to follow on with what Dan talked about with the creation of Lubanga and stuff like that. In episode 149, which was with Leonard Moberg, he actually talks about that meeting and about that was one of the amazing things about that podcast was listening to him retell the story that apparently they were just sitting there and they had just writer's block, no good ideas, and they said they just went out and got absolutely smashed and hammered, and then they came back the next day and it all became flowing. I think you were with me on that podcast, Stephen?
Yeah, I remember that fondly. I couldn't remember who the podcast was, who he'd interviewed, but yeah, I remember. Yeah, the writer's block, and then the next day they come up with all these ideas, and well, there you go have a couple of drinks, or a few more drinks, and the next day your ideas will just fly, for better or worse, according to some people.
Yeah, it was just amazing listening to that story about from Lynette. So that might be worth re-listening to for a lot of fans as well. But yeah, no, that was awesome. Thanks, guys, for doing that. So I guess one of the other things we kind of made briefly mention about it was that Claes had just announced his retirement at the beginning of the year. But you know, from what I understand, he had committed to a bunch more Phantom stories, and I believe the latest issue has one of his stories in it. Is that correct, Mikael?
Yeah, it's a continuation of the Hollywood murders, and it's called The Vengeance of Nosferatu, or something like that in English. And from what I've heard, it was the last one he wrote. And I mean, it's an amazing story. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I have hopes for continuation in that storyline with the current Phantom's mother.
Yeah, I remember that story, the Hollywood murders. It was about how was it the 20th found his wife. Now we can confirm we have been in communication with some of the people that are a little bit more knowledgeable than us in this area, that there are 4 more stories that Claes has written that are yet to be printed. So I guess, and I believe one of them is the 22nd Saga story. Maybe 3 of them are the 22nd Saga. So I guess that's something that we've still got 4 more stories by Claes, and I look forward to hearing your reviews from them, Mikael, and I look forward to reading them in our own free comic as well. So, guys, what would your lasting memory of Claes be? Mikael, as someone who has actually met him, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I've met him as a part of the Scandinavian chapter of the Lee Falk Memorial Bengalas Explorers Club. He has been and met up with us a few times, and I mean, the strongest memory we have is from the book fair. We had 1 hour planned, and then we were going to dinner, and everyone was so excited, and especially Claes, and he started talking about Phantomen, and he continued, and I think we ran 2 hours over time. Everyone was starving, and it was it was an amazing, he really was so engaged, and it was an amazing talk about the Phantom. And I think we talked a lot about this election in Bengala, how they sat down, he and Ulf and the other ones, and they were like, how can we, what the Phantom has it too easy as his animal companion. He's friends with the president. He has his whole Bandar army. To make it more interesting, we should just remove everything. And yeah, I mean, yeah.
Mm. So would that be your lasting memory? I guess the election in Bengala, and also the meeting that you had with him at the dinner.
Yeah, the meetings mostly, of course. I mean, it was amazing meeting him.
Mm. So, Stephen, as someone like the rest of us who haven't had the opportunity to be able to meet him, what would your lasting memory of Claes be?
Well, pretty much what I think I mentioned earlier. That he's such a prolific story writer, and that his ideas, along with the rest of the Brains Trust, are still flowing today. Even 30 years on from that meeting where they all got drunk. And yeah, just my last memory be prolific, and there is a huge, whether you like the stories or not, they're fairly well crafted. They're very, very well put together, I would say. Dan, being an English teacher, might disagree, but some of the storylines aren't always my thing, and not every story is going to be a hit, but he does have a lot of hits, and which is great after with nearly 300 stories.
Yeah. Dan, what about you, mate?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I probably had a smile to myself when you first asked the question, because I can't escape it. It's on the record. People can go back and listen to the podcasts where I've been quite critical of Reimerthi's stories in the past, and some of his creations I haven't enjoyed at all, and I'm firmly on the record in that regard. But I guess like yourself and like Stephen, we've only known Claes through his writing, and so you can't really know the man in that sense. So my memory of him, or what I'll think of when I think back about him, yes, the volume of stories that he's written. It was interesting when I went back today. I thought that, and we'll go through our top 5 stories I think later, but mine tend to be from earlier in his career, in his writing career, and certainly under the pseudonym of Michael Thierres is probably some of my favourite stories. And I probably didn't like the direction he took the Phantom story and some of those elements over the last probably 15 or 16 years of his tenure. But I guess this drifts into his legacy. But what I really have enjoyed about his stories is his willingness to push the boundaries of the Phantom mythos and the universe that Falk created. Falk was very much, we know this, was very much about the 21st Phantom, and the vast majority of his stories were about the 21st Phantom. Klaus was someone who said, well, what about the 20th Phantom? How did he meet his wife? What about the 16th Phantom? What was he doing before he took the oath? So, going back and exploring those other generations. Joe and when I first started listening to the podcast, it was yourself and Joe, and I remember Joe in particular not liking the historical stories, and a lot of those are Klaus's. And people who liked the historical stories will probably have a really fond memory of him. People who didn't so much like those, less so. So he's when someone, and Steve sort of said this as well, when someone's written as many stories as he has, not all of them are going to be crackers, but some of them are, and some of the best Phantom stories by anybody were written by Klaus. So you've got to acknowledge that, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. To be honest, I probably agree with everything that you said. That I like his earlier work, even though I thought I liked how he pushed the boundaries. I didn't always agree with the boundaries, like with the stories about the Phantom Gladiator and the Phantom Crusader and the I think they call it the Phantom Myth or something like that. I did not like those stories at all. And I'm on the record for saying that I think we should just scrap them all. But he added to it. He makes you think, go, well, maybe the Phantom is more than 400 years. Could he be more than 400 years? We know the ring is from the 1st century. So what happened to the ring before the 1500 years in between that? Could have been worn by another vigilante, or so there's a lot of extra questions, and I love the fact that he was able to add to the Phantom, and I think he's definitely left his mark on the Phantom. I think better than worse. We might not always like the Sandal Singh, cue our favourite image, but but with he's definitely, and he's also made the 21st Phantom's life a lot harder than probably any other writer as well, and that might be maybe my lasting memory of Claes. If I had to choose one, it'll be making the 21st Phantom's life harder.
Well, and every writer should do that, because then we get to see how he fights out of it.
Yeah, and it's not just the Sandal Singh or even the election of Bengala. There was also, he was involved with the Diana's Crisis storyline. I'm not sure. Do you guys remember that storyline?
What was the name of it? Diana's Crisis?
Yeah, it was when Diana actually left the Phantom and she disappeared. She took the twins and just disappeared. Do you remember that storyline, Mikael?
I do, and it's not one of my favorite ones.
No, it wasn't one of my favorites either. But again, he made the 21st Phantom's life difficult.
Yeah, that's true.
And and I think it was Diana was poorly written in that storyline. But I thought the idea of, so basically for those who haven't read it, I can't even remember what thrill issues it is. While I'm talking, could someone quickly Google that or Phantom Wiki that?
So, what was it called?
Diana's Crisis. So basically what had happened is Diana had a moment when she was like, do I really want my children to be brought up in this type of world where, they're going to be trained, then they're going to basically awaiting for my husband to die, and then one of my two children are then going to take the legacy, and there's going to be this circle. And so she was questioning herself, and I guess we all have those moments when we question our life decisions, and we have those moments when we see our children, could I do better? Could I bring them up in a better world? Could I make better decisions? And so there was a lot of self-doubt in Diana, and it was I think one of the reasons why it was so poorly accepted was because I didn't really like the way Diana was written, but it also was spread over about 30 issues, but there was 4 or 5 parts, and they were spread quite far away. And so
he actually didn't write all of them. He only wrote
so
one of them.
I was just going to say, I've also, do you want to go through the 5 parts, Steve?
And that might be the reason why it wasn't written too well either.
Well, what I've got here, I've got part 1, The Mysterious Wreck by Magnus Setter. I'm going to take a guess.
Yep.
Then Klaus does part 2, Diana Disappears. Part 3 is The Search for Diana, which is a Tony DePaul written story. He also does parts 4 and 5 with Diana's Dilemma and Night of the Phantoms.
What through numbers?
Was 1414. Yeah, part 2 is 1415. Part
1425.
Yep.
1428. And part 5 is 1441. So from about 2005, 2006.
There you go. So if you haven't read those, dig them out, and you can kind of see what we're kind of talking about there as well. So thanks for digging those out, guys. So I guess kind of following on, and some of us kind of did talk about it, is for me, if I had to put down his legacy, it will be adding to the Phantom, but also making the 21st Phantom's life more difficult. Do you guys see anything what would you say that his legacy will be? Is there anything else you can add to that, or agree or disagree with?
Well, I think his legacy has to be the expansion of the Phantom timeline, and he or the details about the previous generations. So we've talked and joked sometimes on air and off air about putting together a Phantom family tree, and who married who, and we know that Lee Falk had various Phantoms marrying a number of different people and that sort of thing. He clearly didn't keep track of a family tree himself. From what I can understand, Klaus is someone who did try to put that family tree together and then fill in some blanks. And I suppose if anyone ever had the time and the energy to completely map the Phantom's family tree from Christopher Standish back in 1535 or whichever date you choose, then a lot of those names would have been filled by Claes Reimerthi. So then for that to me, that has to be his legacy, because then that gives a much firmer skeleton, or a much more fleshed out skeleton, to continue the metaphor, for other writers to work with.
Yeah. Mikael?
Yeah, but I also think the legacy is we're getting there with the favorite stories later, but I mean there's a lot of storylines that are so massive that they are must reads and changed. Even though maybe things changed back, a lot of things has been written. Yeah, it's hard to
his and Dan touched upon it as well. His epic stories were epic.
Yeah.
and I'm looking through the list of all of our top fives, and there's some epic stories in there. There's Black Love, there's the Triads, there's the Lubanga series. The one thing that we haven't even talked about so far, which is the 22nd Phantom Saga. We've all made mention. We all either like it, love it, or like aspects of it. We've all enjoyed it and stuff like that as well. Death in the East End was another one and stuff like that. You're right. There's a lot of epic stories, multi-part stories that. Year One, that's another one that I know is quite close to your heart, Mikael, especially with the game produced about it as well. It's just his epic. If he was a movie producer, he would be. Was it Ridley Scott who did the big epic movies like The Gladiator and and stuff like that? That's kind of like where I see him, is that big epic type of person who produced the big blockbusters.
Yeah. And for what I've said about filling in the family tree, perhaps there is a bit of that with the 22nd Phantom as well. And I think the way I phrased it in the obituary that I sort of started to try and sit down and pen today was about he's taken on ground that no one else dared to do, not even Lee Falk decided to, right, let's see how we can move the 21st into the 22nd Phantom and get that generational change happening. So he certainly had the courage to do that. He's laid out a ground sheet or mapped out how that could be done. And it will be interesting to see how, if there's unpublished stories in that saga as well, where he leaves off on that and where another author may well pick it up. And that could be his greatest legacy if that path continues and we end up with just all 22nd Phantom stories coming out of Team Phantom, and in particular, there's no doubt that will be his biggest legacy.
Yeah. You used the word courage. That's a very good word, because Lee Falk didn't have enough courage to write out the 21st Phantom. A few people have kind of dabbled and thought about it, but in just looking at some of the stories, there's the Last Phantom, which is a 2-part story where the Phantom kind of gives up the concept, throws his ring into the river and says, "That's it, I'm not going to do it anymore." There's the Phantom versus the Singh, which is the 2050 story. And now there's the 22nd Phantom story. He's definitely, that's a very good point, Danny. He's had the courage to do what no one else would do.
Which I think sometimes puts people off, because that's not what they would have done. But they didn't, and he did. So I think you sort of alluded to it earlier. He pushes the boundaries, and certainly, killing off the 21st and bringing in the 22nd, that's a boundary that, is fairly firm for a lot of people. So when it gets poked at.
He hasn't killed off the 21st, not yet.
No, but he's pushing that boundary. He's pushing that boundary. So.
Yeah. The 21st Phantom has just disappeared, which is maybe maybe like the editor Mikael trying to pull the reins in a little bit, saying, let's not kill him off too much.
Harold Holt has never actually officially died, and that might not mean much
He's
to
still
Mikael.
the Prime Minister now, isn't he?
That's right. Our international audience, Harold Holt used to be Prime Minister of Australia, disappeared when he went for a swim one day and never came back. We don't know that he's dead, but it's 60 years ago, so probably.
Did I ever tell you that when I was living in Melbourne, I was driving along and I looked out the window and just had to laugh. There was a Harold Holt swimming pool.
Yep. Only in Australia.
So, Stephen, anything you want to add to his legacy?
Nah, I think we've covered it all.
Yeah. All right. Well, while we got Stephen, do you want to, while you're there, do you want to tell us? Now, this is going to be a hard choice. There's 300 odd stories to choose, including stories. Now, I believe, like what we said before, there's 4 stories that have yet to be written, published in Phantom Man, and there's, as we found out today, Dan, we were talking about it, is there's about 15 or 20 more that we haven't even had published in the Frew comic yet either as well. And I believe Grange Wallace actually did a cover to one of the stories, which I believe was the man with the
Silver Nose.
And I believe that, is that right, Mikael? That's a story that's created by Claes?
Yeah, and that was during this 2020, right, with all almost all reprints. That's a multi-part story that took up most of the non-reprints issues.
So maybe that might be Fru's way of doing a nice little tribute for him as well. But as progressing or getting sidetracked, which we usually do on this podcast, Stephen, you want to tell us a couple of your favourite stories that Claes has written?
So I had a bit of a look through Phantom Wiki because, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of who wrote what, but going through the titles, so many spring to mind. There's a memory of them, and seeing everybody else's list. Oh yeah, I remember that one. I remember that one too. But thinking about favourite stories, it's tricky, but I've got to put the Triads at number one. When I came back to reading the Phantom again after a few years off, and I went back home and I got my old Phantoms, that was the first story that I reread when I had access back to my old 90s Phantoms. And so I'm putting that as my number one. The next one, I think it was written a while ago, but I only just remember reading it recently, was The Pugilist, the one where Colonel Weeks is a young fella, he's a boxer.
Yeah.
You see those cogs churning there.
Because I'm looking at it and I'm going, what is that story? I haven't started looking for it.
Well, the way I did this is when I read through the names, what sprung out? What didn't I have to go and reread the synopsis or go pull out a comic? What were the stories that I could remember? And so these are the top. I think I've got 5 here, and some of them are being published recently, rather than all the way back. But this next one, the Phantom Man or Myth, this one springs out for me for 2 reasons. One, I've got a page of original artwork of it, which is Saviuk. It was the first page I ever owned, which is great. And there was the reason why I got that page was it made me laugh. There was a bit of a chuckle there, with Devil. So that's what I remember about that. I just remember enjoying it. It gave me a little chuckle in parts and that sort of thing. A recent one, and this story exceeded my expectations. When this came out in through a couple of years ago, I thought, what the heck is this? The Butterfly Man? Like, that doesn't sound like a great character or a great storyline or something. But then I read it and I thought, that was bloody good. I want to read more about the Butterfly Man. I thought that story really opened itself or lent itself to having a backstory about this Butterfly Man who, this leading crime figure who, as far as I can aware of, is the first time we've read about it in a Phantom comic. But could he have been, what's the word, puppet master? Could he be behind pulling the strings on a few things in the background, but the Phantom just didn't know who the bad guy was. And now he finally confronts him. I think that had so much that could happen with it. There was so much potential with it. And the story was great. I couldn't believe that I really enjoyed that story.
I remember that you and I think we both put it in our top in the 2018 best of.
Yeah, it was definitely not best of for whatever year it was in. So 2018. For those reasons, it surprised the heck out of me. It was I'm going to go back and reread it, and hopefully I'll have the same reaction. The Election Saga from the 90s, being that's when I was starting to, I had the paper round, and so at the end of the week, collect my pay and go straight to the comics and buy the comics. So was happening around about the same time that I was first buying the comics. And of course it caused confusion, a little bit of confusion, because, you got Lubanga, and then all of a sudden he's not. And then once you got your head around that, you could enjoy it for what it was, which was a different take on the status quo. Not to everyone's liking, but it provided some great stories. So whether you like it, that they've changed, and talk about Phantom lore in another podcast. But they provided some interesting stories where you said the Phantom, he's got it hard. He's paying to a corner. How do we get him out? And I'd probably my last one, my number 5, for the sheer size of it and the sheer attitude to get it done. 300-page story. Heart of Darkness. Now, I'm not putting it in officially because I need to reread it in one hit. So if Frew can put this into a graphic novel or trade paperback or whatever, so we can read it in one hit rather than a couple of pages there and a couple of months later you pick up on it again, just so we got that flow and that continuous flow. And then I'm sure I'd have Heart of Darkness up there with a bullet.
Some great stories there. Mikael.
Yeah, I'm nodding to Stephen, but and let's start with the election in Bengal. I mean, I really love it when you were talking about earlier about the courage, and this is like the courage to change the whole. It doesn't end with they're back in Eden and having a vacation, but it's the story after story. It gets worse and worse, and then it moves around. I really enjoyed reading that because it becomes this huge story where the whole world changes. And I get the similar feeling with the year 1, but then it's this. You look back at the first year, and I as you know, I really enjoyed that. I based it on the game and stuff. Then I really enjoyed the retelling of the first Phantom, how everything works out there. But that's more of a fleshing out of the Leaf Hulk, but they do it really well and makes everything make sense in a good way. But then I like it when they dabble with the future, and like the 22nd Phantom. I said it many times in my reviews. I so enjoy reading those stories, and at least for us in Sweden, when they first came out, they said this is not a what if story. This is basically some years in the future when we don't know, but this is canon, at least for us, and it's amazing. Again, courage, and then it's the 2050. And there they actually said it is a what if story. This is what might happen in 2050. But still, he wrote it in 2000, and he wrote about Dogai Singh, who has been this baddie for many years. And you would guess that he would be the baddie for the rest of the Team Phantom history. But in 2015, they actually wrote in so 2050 works. They wrote him into a coma and put him in stasis so he can wake up in 2050. And I'm like remembering that story 15 years ago. And we should now, when we have Sandal Singh, we should put him in cryo. So it makes sense. I think that's
Dogai Singh, correct?
Dogai Singh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing forethought, or having the mind to remember the stories. Yeah.
Do you guys, Dan and Stephen, do you guys remember the 2050 story?
Yeah.
I haven't read it for a long time now, so I've got a vague recollection of it, but it was one of the ones that I dipped into and read the synopsis for today on Phantom Wiki as part of preparation for this. And yeah, certainly remember that, and remember it being a bit of a what if, but you're absolutely right, Mikael, for them to be then 15 years later writing the cryogenic scene to allow for that 2050 story. I think that speaks to how much they rated it and how popular it was, and how prepared people are for those what if stories to be actually come into the canon of where it's going.
It kind of reminds me of, I'm not sure for those who remember our last chat with Andrew Constant when he talked about his own Android Phantom. He made a really good point about, it's a what if story, but if fans like it so much, it can almost then become canon if fans like it so much. And I reckon the 2050 one is. I think that's the 2050 thing. It's a perfect example of it. For those who want to dig that up, it's in through issue 1276 and in the Swedish issue and the Norway issue number 21 of the year 2000. So for those who might want to dig that out.
And is that the one where the Phantom's got the glasses or the
Goggle.
the goggles? Yeah. And I remember the cryo suit as well.
Yeah, and he makes a joke. He's in this spacious floating craft type of thing. And he makes a joke, goes, "Oh, back 50 years ago, you would have to sit on a plane crammed up like sardines in a tin or something like that. How did those barbarians ever manage it?" Or something like along those lines. And it was I remember the glasses and that kind of little throwaway comment as well. It was it was great. Dan, you got a couple of stories for us that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah, I do, and I probably, as I said, when I read through, I did similar to Stephen, just went through the list and jumped at stories the titles that I remembered, and maybe that's got something to do with the covers, but the reason I would remember the covers is because I picked up the issues a number of times, and so for me, Black Glove was a pirate story that I really enjoyed. I was delighted to see Frew reproduce that as part of their Supernova special not long ago. So that was originally published in 1985 by Phantom in number 4, 1985. I would have first read it in Frew issue 898, sorry. And then again recently the Supernova in issue 1841. But that two-parter was a fun one. I haven't put these in order like Stephen did, but just stories that sort of jumped out at me. Deadly Infection is one that a story that just for whatever reason has really stuck with me. I don't know why it appealed to me in the moment at the time, but I've read that story, I don't know, 20 or 30 times. I really enjoyed that idea of the Rhodian terrorists have snuck smallpox in and they're trying to smuggle it, and a secret operative, Miss Mist, who's this new character that gets introduced, who's this short blonde-haired, as I say, secret agent who's trying to get the smallpox back to Rhodia, and the Phantom's involved, and so that's another 1980s story, number 16, 1986 in Sweden, number 890 in Australia. Death in the East End, that 3-part series, I enjoyed the Phantom going to London, and I think this is probably one of the historical stories of classes that I did enjoy. So again, early in the piece, number 16, 1987, and issue 951 for Frew. The Duel on Destiny Top was one that I really enjoyed. Another story from the mid-90s, so number 13, 1995 in Sweden, and issue number 1118 in Australia. Duel on Destiny Top. I think I remember enjoying that because it really explored that idea of we talk about a jungle character. The Phantom fighting off witch doctors, and it was about destiny. It was about the prophecies being fulfilled, and I enjoy the jungle stories the most. I guess I'm the traditionalist on the podcast, I suppose, and I enjoy Lee Falk's jungle stories. I enjoyed Klaus's jungle story in this instance, and Waraboo's Secret was another one from the late 90s, issue 8, 1998. In Phantom and number 1202 in Frew. Interestingly, also became one of those crossover stories that was used as that bridging period between Lee Falk and Tony DePaul, really. So Waraboo's Secret was also used as a Sunday. And I just enjoyed that idea of exploring a side character and finding out a little bit more about the leader of the Jungle Patrol in that instance.
I think that was Warradoos.
In the Sunday, it was Warradoos, but in the original, Waraboos. So.
No, it's a different character. Warradoos was a guy that got sick in the jungle and then became the kind of like someone else, but
Okay, well, the one that I remember is the original, I guess, the one that was produced for Team Phantom in the first place, and then published by Frew.
Yeah, I actually almost put that in my list as well, because it was like we were talking about. It's a perfect example of the Phantom or of Class adding to these characters and stuff like that. Where what you find out a little bit about, he's got a son, he's got an ex-girlfriend, and then also in Stephen's list he talked about it with the pugilist, which was Colonel Weeks as well. There's another example of learning about these characters that that Lee Falk never explored. Colonel Wirrabury just turned up out of the blue. Colonel Weeks was just always there, but and the same as in the triads where he added to their legacy. They're great. They're great options, and definitely East End. That's an amazing storyline. I've read that so many.
I have to go back and reread that one because it's not ringing a bell for me. But you're all talking about it, so I better go and reread that one.
Do yourself a favor, Stephen. Reread it. It was 3 issues.
What numbers we're looking at?
1951, 52, and 53, I think.
About then, yeah. And then I can't remember which Phantom it was, but he gets kidnapped and by this mysterious Madden X. And,
I was having a look at the synopsis on Fan and Wiki when you guys were talking.
It's a great story. It's a great story, and the legacies, these big stories are just that's just a really good one. And that was back when big multi-part stories wasn't really the norm for a Team Phantom Man either.
I'd also give a shout out to one of the Sunday stories, Warmongers, Sunday 155. Now that might be because I really enjoyed Graham Nolan's art in that particular story. I thought that was one of his personally. I thought that was one of his better stories on the strip. But so I'm not sure if I'm influenced by Nolan's art or Reimerthi's story there. But I do have fond memories of that story as well.
Yeah. No, there's some great choices, guys. Well, now,
so can you get yours down to a top 5, Jermayn?
I think we'll be lucky if he gets down to a top 12.
Yeah. So for those of you, here's pulling back the curtain. There was a message going out. Can you name your top 4 or 5 stories for the podcast? And I thought, oh, yep, no worries. I have a look at the run sheet. 17 on Jermayn's list.
And I actually stopped as well.
Come on, you've got to be a bit more
selective.
In
defense,
like that's why I said Election Saga, and that just incorporated a lot of stories.
In my defense, I knew these guys were going to list half of my ones, so I thought, well, I'll just go, and then I'll talk about the ones that haven't been mentioned. So a couple of them, the Rose of Cairo, which which I really enjoyed that story. It was a fun story. The Count of Bengal was another one. So I agree with what everyone else has said, but other stories that I've enjoyed that haven't been mentioned. The Count of Bangalore was a story. It reminds me of I can't remember. There was when I was younger. I read this story where there was a guy who changed his appearance, but it was probably based. The Count of Bengal was based on this story, but I really enjoyed that story, and I read that first, and then I reread the Phantom one, and I was like, oh, this is the same story, and it's about a past Phantom. It's about a person not quite being the Phantom, it's the Phantom Son, and it's just it was a really fun story that I really, really enjoyed. Now, a couple of others we've talked about where he's pushed the boundaries. The Prodigal Son. Now, I'm not sure if you guys remember the Prodigal Son.
I read the synopsis, I think, when I saw it there.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember what it was about.
Now, we all know the Prodigal Son is comes from a Bible story where you've got a son who turns away from his father and lives a different life and then comes back. So this is kind of like a Phantom version of that biblical story, where you've got and I liked how they didn't disclose who the forefather was. So it's an undisclosed forefather of the Phantom, goes to study, falls in with the bad crowd, falls for a princess of the Singh pirates, and then actually becomes a Singh pirate as well. And then he sees his dad get murdered, and it changes his life. And then he becomes the Phantom, but he still wears the what do you call it? The tattoo on his inner thigh and stuff like that. So it was I'll just pick out where the numbers came from. It was 1292 for free, which was in 2001, and then in Sweden and Norway it was number 9 in 2001. It's a story that I guess where he's pushed the envelope again. He's it's kind of something you would never expect to be able to read, but it blew my mind. It was like, whoa. Do you guys remember that story?
I'm looking at my list. Apparently, I've got 2 copies of it, so I should go back and read it.
I certainly don't remember it as clearly as you do, Jim.
Yeah. What about you, Mikael?
I mean, I remember reading it 20 years ago, and I remember having. I mean, it really made a mark, but now I don't remember if it was because I really enjoyed it or if I was horrified. But I really remember the story.
Yeah.
And I also remember like that someone that in a few issues later, someone sent in a mail to the editor that was in like the club pages where they actually like did the research to find out which Phantom it could be.
Yeah. On Phantom Wiki, they've got it that to an unofficial theory published in number 19, 2001, the Prodigal Son is the 8th Phantom. So
I remember reading that as well and thinking, I mean that's why I get into the Phantom, because I really enjoyed the lore and that you could do this kind of research.
Yeah, and it showed the humanity of the Phantom. And that's one of the things that's important to me about the Phantom, is that not, and we see it even in today's where it's like, oh yeah, my dad did this, but I don't want to follow my dad. I want to do my own path. And we're talking about humans here with all their frailties, with their shortcomings, and maybe the 7th Phantom wasn't the best dad, and this was his way of rebelling, and we see it even Lee Falk did it with the 3rd Phantom, where he didn't want to be the Phantom, he wanted to be an actor, and it showed a human element to my hero, the Phantom, and I like that. The other story that is a what if. Is the In a Strange Land, which is so it was kind of like, well, in this era in the 1500s, there was a lot of ships sailing around the world. What if the Phantom was shipwrecked on the shores of Japan instead of Africa? And the story was pretty average. Not average, it was a good story, but it was again Claes pushing the boundaries, and it kind of stands out because it is so different. And my last story I want to mention, I'm not sure if this is 5 or 10, is Patrolman Aurora. Now, a bit like Steve, I got some art from this story, but it was about which Phantom was it that married the Hatner witch, Heloise? Do you guys remember that one?
I know what you're talking about. I don't know which Phantom was.
I mean the like 15, 16, 17 Phantom.
Yeah. No, sorry, it wasn't that one. It was Natalie of Navarra. So
that's the 6th.
Yeah. That was the 6th. So there was Natalie's cousin or something fell in love with the Phantom, and she wanted to get closer to the Phantom, so she disguised herself as a bloke and joined the Jungle Patrol. And it was just a really it was something different. You know, women in the Jungle Patrol hasn't always been accepted as it is now. You know, it was kind of like that forbidden love, and I enjoyed, you know, the Sixth Phantom. He's probably one of my favourites, with, you know, Redbeard and Crusher and stuff like that. The art was by Sal Veluto, which I kind of fell in love with his artwork in this story. So it's just one of those stories that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah, I reread that quite recently, and it's a really good story about, and she's so in love with him, with the Phantom, but she's pretending to be a man, to be in the Jungle Patrol. So he's like, "Who are you?" When the reveal is there, it's like this, "I don't even know who you are" meme.
Typical Phantom style, where it's just like he's just so used to women falling in love with him that he just doesn't even know. So I reckon with all those stories that we've mentioned, there's probably a good, well, let's just say we all stuck to 5. There's 4 of us. So it's a good 20 stories that that we mentioned, and then of course we've done the triads and the what do you call it, the election story, which is about 20 stories in itself. So so hopefully those who have listened to it, if you are on YouTube, I'll try and flash up as many covers and insert pictures and stuff like that as possible to kind of remind you of some of these stories. So if you've got the issues, you can go back and read them.
Can you put in the info section on the video the issues for like through and Phantom? Just might make things easier for people. Yeah,
we'll do, Stephen, and you've just volunteered yourself to do that list as well. So thanks, mate.
That's all right. I could probably do it tomorrow, actually.
Yeah, sounds good. So we've kind of talked about, you know, we've talked about some characters that that he has created, and you know, we've talked about a whole heap of them in there. So, I guess, guys, if you've just got 1 or 2 characters that he's kind of created that's stood the test of time, that's stood out to use, that you've got a good memory about, if you can just quickly fire off some of those.
Oh, I'll jump in. The one that I've nominated is Miss Mist. I've talked about her already. I did like the way that character developed to become, you know, not just this secret operative from Rhodia, but then to work in Luaga's doctor's office and that sort of thing. And we had that continuation of her character. I really liked how she fit into the Phantom's universe without necessarily needing to break the Phantom's universe. Because as I've said, I like the boundaries where they are. And for me, Klaus pushed them a little bit too much at times, but Miss Mist was that perfect character who fit in the Phantom's universe without, you know, disrupting the areas that I really enjoyed. So,
yeah. Now, from memory, she was actually the reason why you actually got your letter published in a free letter as well.
Yeah, you've done well there. Yeah, that might have something. That may well have something to do with because I was able to correct Jim Shepard one time when he said, you know, a message from the publisher, this is the first appearance of that character. And I said, no, hang on, wasn't she in? And it might have even been in Deadly Infection. Wasn't she?
Was, yeah.
It might have been. And so I got a free copy of Phantom Goes to War. So yeah, perhaps there's that sentimental attachment to the character as well.
Yeah, no, Miss is a great character. She's probably underutilized in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And
in the tradition of all great Phantom secondary characters.
Yeah. But I will
say,
and
then gone.
Yeah, I didn't like the way that Filmang used Miss Mist. In a couple of his stories, I preferred her as the agent and not the love struck
teenager.
Yeah,
agree with that.
Yeah, but no, great choice. Stephen, what about you, buddy?
Well, I mentioned him earlier, the Butterfly Man. I want to see something more about the Butterfly Man. I thought he was an interesting character. One issue and that's all we've got. I want to see more of this fella.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you there. That was a great story. I'm gonna have to go back and read it as well. What about you, Mikael?
Yeah, I mean, Miss Mist is a great character. I mean, I really enjoy strong female characters, as you might know. With like, I want Diana not to be the damsel in distress. I want her to kick some ass. Miss Mist is a great character with her secret agent giving the Phantom a run for his money. But to name someone new, I would say Sandal Singh. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool in the beginning, like how they changed the Singh Pirates to be a corporation, because I feel like a modern pirates could be the big corporation that just does bad thing and then buys the election basically and becomes
That
president.
was very good. I like that too.
And I think that's a modern villain. And then, like, I think it would be better if she wasn't in love with the Phantom. But I mean, there's a lot of depth there, and I mean, it's strong female characters, and we could have more of those in this comic books, I think.
Now, Dan and Mikael, does Miss remind you of your wives? is that why
she's blonde?
Yeah, blonde, strong characters. You know, is there something there, or
Is she being drawn by Felmang or not? And I'm not going to say where that answer would take my answer.
I don't think she's watching, so I can say yes.
What about you, Jerm? Just to shift the subject a little bit. What would your favourite Claes character be?
So now I like Sandal Singh. I'm not as keen on the illegitimate son.
No one is.
Yeah, I can live with it if it comes out that it's not his. But that's we've had a discussion. I enjoyed what he did with Lubanga, but something that I also really enjoyed was the backstory that he added to Dogai Singh. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, it was about 2010, I would say at a guess, where there was that little ongoing saga about Dogai, the rise to power. And I'm not sure if you guys remember that, but Dogai Singh was always your cardboard cutout bad guy. You know, your token bad guy. He was, everyone loved to hate him. He was he was that type of guy. But in this story, he almost liked Dogai reading this story. Even though he was a scumbag, he was your typical really, really bad guy. But you started to develop not maybe a soft spot for him because of the story that Claes wrote, or the couple of stories that he wrote about. It was really good writing, and again, which we've talked about numerous times, he developed characters that are more than just your secondary characters that kind of get put into one story and then forgotten about, except of course Stephen's Butterfly Man. But yeah, so that was something that I really, really enjoyed, and it was a character that he didn't create, but he added to and kind of made him his own. So I really enjoyed that.
I actually didn't realize that he created Lubanga.
Well, I guess it was him, Team Phantom Man.
Lubanga first came into it in that election in Bengali part 1, didn't he? So that was, it's a close story. Whether it was a larger editorial team who put the idea of the character together, but he's certainly credited with being the writer that introduced it.
Yeah, and that's probably because, like I said before, the election story was happening around about when I was first reading it, and was getting confused with the newspaper or Forkism and Phantom, and So I just thought Lubanga might have been a fork creation.
Yeah.
Just in that confusion and all that.
It was around when I started reading the Phantom and getting really, really addicted to it, I guess you could call it as well. And I believe it was around with you as well, Mikael. And it just hooked me. Just this, this fact, like, oh wow, his world's turned upside down. It was riveting reading. I enjoyed going back through and reading all the back issues and trying to dissect all the clues. I enjoyed it that much that there was a group of 5 of us. It was me, my brother, and a couple of others that we loved this story that much that we actually started creating our own comic called The Death of Lubanga. Because it was something that had hooked us that much. And we would read and devour the latest story, and we were like, oh man, we don't have the latest story, on the latest issues, not about Lubanga, it's about something else. And it was just, it was a good time, like learning about the mythos of the Phantom during all of the upheaval.
I remember starting reading after the election of Bangala, and I remember like getting back issues, and I didn't get them all in chronological order. So I remember getting a bit confused with this Lubanga, Luaga, because it was in the beginning of reading Phantom, and the names were very close to me. So, and Babato too. I confused all 3 of them.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm only a few years older than you guys. I was in year 12 and first year uni when that election in Bengali series kicked off. And I remember at the time hating it because I was old enough to have had embedded in me. No, I did. I really didn't like it. Those were the. I'd really enjoyed Michael Thierry's as a author. I did not like this new upstart Claes Reimerthi who's coming in and trying to fix everything up. That was probably those couple of issues where I've sort of set my tone of no, I prefer the fork stories to what Phantom are trying to do. So, just for the sake of a few years.
Yeah. So something that's interesting is I was born in 1983, right? Michael Thierry's was writing stories in 1984. That was when his first one was published. So he's been pretty much writing Phantom stories for as long as I've been alive for.
Yep.
So it kind of shows just what a huge hole this leaves us. And so I guess the question is, and we've all talked about the 22nd Phantom Saga, and we've been told that the 22nd Phantom Saga will continue because there was plans to continue it when he announced his retirement. So guys, big question. If Andreas and Team Phantom Men were totally stumped, they had absolutely no clue, and they thought, what would the good folks at Team Phantom at ChronicleChamber do? This is our opportunity. Whose name would you put forward to continue on with the 22nd Phantom Saga?
Who have they got? Like who have they replaced as head writer? Like I know Mikael Sol had taken on some writing jobs, and he was the one who I guess finally resolved. And I say that in neither a positive or a negative sense, but resolved the issue of. Lamanda Luaga being president. He brought him back in a story that, actually I probably should have said, spoiler alert, hasn't been published in Australia yet. The Swedish know that Luaga is president again. The Australians don't. But Mikael's no longer there either. So who's the lead writer now for Team Phantom?
I don't think there is one. Mikael, do you know of? I don't think there is a lead writer.
I do not think so either. But I mean, I see a lot of promise in Andreas himself. I mean, I enjoyed the stories he has done. And yeah. I mean, Claes is leaving. I mean, I really enjoyed Soul's adventures as well. And Reimerthi is now gone. I mean, it's going to be...
Big shoes.
Yeah, big shoes to fill.
Now, I don't think we choose the one person. I think it's going to have to be a collective, and I think that could be a good thing in the sense that, like, if you're looking probably the last 5-10 years, Claes Reimerthi was writing probably 80% of all the news stories, and I reckon it could see like we've seen.
I think it's more than that. Just looking at the list, yeah.
So we'll say 95%. So you've got, I reckon, now Mikael Sol did say to me, I'm not sure if he said it to me or on the podcast or wherever, but I have seen him say that just because he's not the editor doesn't mean he won't do stories anymore. So I reckon, there's that. Andreas Eriksson.
That's good.
Andreas Eriksson, which you've said, I know he's written a couple for Team Phantom, and he's got a couple that have been purchased for free, which I believe we might see one in the next couple of months as well. But a couple of names that there was also the new writer who wrote a story this year as well. He used to work for Team Phantom. What was his name, Mikael?
Yeah, what was I'm checking it now, but I remember the story. It was the one with the Ra's Ghul treasure.
There is an article on our website. It hasn't been published by Frew yet. But another name, Mikael's going to find that name while I continue talking. Another name which... sorry, Steve?
Well, I'm just going... Well, what I've been doing, I've just been looking at the writers over the last, say, decade, who they got in their hand at the moment. And there's a Carlson, there's a...
That's the one, Carlson.
Daniel Carlson, yeah.
Yeah. There's a Jacob Habink. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Mikael Sols, we've said. Spay, I don't think we've mentioned him. Madden, he's written a few stories lately as well.
That's who I was going to suggest. Philip Madden and
there's Bishop as well.
David Bishop, the Kiwi. Philip Madden and David Bishop. They're my two choices of who to pick up the 22nd Phantom. Because Philip Madden he's a good writer. He's been on our podcast as well. I can't remember the episode at the top of my head. But in talking to him, he knew who the Phantom was. And David Bishop was actually he was born and raised in New Zealand and grew up on the free Phantom comics. Again, he's been in a podcast as well. And he has a very good understanding of who the Phantom is as well. So if Andreas has hit a bit of a roadblock and he can't think of anyone, they're the two names that I would put up, Philip Madden and David Bishop, because they've created good stories in the past, and I reckon they will be able to take over the 22nd Phantom Saga.
It's not often that I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jermaine, but looking at this list of who they've got, like I said, in the last decade, those are the two names that are singing out to me as well. If Soul as well, if he chimes in, and if they work as a team, I can't remember Erickson. Oh, Erickson did the Blood Rain. But I'd go those top three. If we're just looking at three, I'd have those three in my people who you'd trust to do the right thing with, do a good story with it. Yeah.
So Philip
and not
wrote
kill him off.
the Golden Eagle, the Phantom Colt, the Mark of Cain, and the Pandemic as well, which is kind of ironic. And and then David Bishop wrote the Kate Somerset saga, which I think most people enjoyed. He's got the Little Bow of Little John, which was another great story as well. So he would be the one that I would. Those are the two that I would put as well.
And look, I really enjoy those two authors as well. So if there's anyone who could take on this 22nd Phantom Saga, I'd enjoy either of those. Just flicking or scrolling through our back catalogue, Philip Madden was interviewed for podcast number 22. That's how long ago.
22?
Yeah.
I remember actually doing that podcast with. That
Yeah.
can't be that long ago.
Would have been one of your first ones, I think, Stephen. It's certainly well
Would have been
before my
close to
time. So, no, but I can't find David Bishop, but I'm sure he's in there somewhere. But just a quick scroll through hasn't released. But if they either of those guys take up the mantle of the number one writer, I'm sure we'll need to get them back on. Hopefully, they're a bit. Because you sort of said it right at the start, at the top, Germ, but one of my regrets will be that we never did get Claes on the podcast. I know we got that written interview with him via Paul, but I would have always loved to have get Claes on, and I know it would have been interesting with my taste or distaste for some of his stories, but would have really enjoyed the opportunity to have a chat and dig his brain. So, fortunately, not to be.
Yeah, it was episode 117, David Bishop, so a little bit more recent. But in saying that, we're up to episode 194, so it's still quite a while ago. Some great names, some great ideas.
What about good old Tony DePaul? Reckon he'd have a crack at it?
Yeah, I reckon he's he
Too
would
busy with
be
the proper law.
Yeah.
There was no reaction from Dan. I was thought.
Yeah.
I
Sounded a bit like Dan. Was that Dan doing a bit of ventriloquism or something like that?
No, I was just trying to work out how that might work, where he's doing the proper stories, but also doing the made-up stories. No disrespect at all, because I think one of the things that Tony has done really well is bring those two universes together, and obviously he had a foot in the Team Phantom camp before he came onto King Features. And in fact, we should say Claes had a significant role in, and I think I alluded to it right at the very beginning, but Claes had a significant role in keeping the Phantom newspaper strip alive once Lee Falk died, because I think we would look back, with the benefit of 20-something years hindsight now and say, well, it didn't look like King Features had a plan for when Lee Falk died. As I sort of said with the Brains Trust and Alf Grunberg, they did have a plan and a thought for what might happen. And I think Claes and Tony DePaul between them. But I wouldn't be surprised if Claes had the whip hand, if you like, in that period, to keep stories appearing in the newspaper strip while King Features worked out what next. So they're really, we can't probably underplay the role that Claes had in keeping the newspaper strip. Didn't miss a beat. Whereas if it had taken a week off, a month off, would it have even come back? How easily could it have died then? So I think we owe Claes a great debt of appreciation for that, if nothing else.
Yeah, and it got better. What they did, they made the strip better, and it's probably at its healthiest since, dare I say it, maybe the 70s or the early 80s. At the moment, it's at its healthiest.
Yeah, you could certainly make a fair argument for that, for sure.
So as you can tell, we might not agree with everything, and we've talked about some areas that we don't agree with what Claes did, but it is fairly evident, and I hope our listeners have identified that we do rate what his legacy, what his imprint, what he's left us with the character has. He's had a huge input in our lives in the Phantom for the last 35 years. So if you're listening to this and you're enjoying all these memories that are coming back and these stories and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that, and stuff like that. And if you were like, oh, I would like to be able to pay tribute or anything like that, if you've got some memories or some contributions that you would like to be able to pass to us, please do. They can be written, they can be an audio, they can be a video. We would like to be able to put something together, whether it's another podcast or even just a little video clip or even just an article. If you've got something that you would like to contribute, please do. You can email us at chroniclechamber@gmail.com, or we are on Facebook and social media, and you can always hit up one of us as well on social media as well if needed. Now, Mikael, before I go, is there any other memories about Claes that 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 you would like to share with us before we close the podcast?
I would rather restate that. I mean, he was very passionate about comic book writing and especially about Phantom and just a great guy. And
yeah. So Steve, Dan, and do you just want to just leave one more statement before we sign off?
Look, for me, you go, Steve.
No, I was just thinking I can't think of anything else to say. I'll just be repeating what I've already done.
Yeah, I just think for me, it's interesting that he's so polarizing, and you said it earlier, in a sense, Mikael. You said you either really enjoyed it or were horrified by it, and I think when you're an author like Reimerthi, who, and we've said it, was courageous enough to push the boundaries and explore what might be with a character as iconic and as universal as the Phantom, sometimes you're going to nail it and really do things that people love, but sometimes you're also going to miss the mark. And and again, I've said it before, I'm on the record of saying that I could probably have found it much easier to do my 5 least favorite Claes Reimerthi stories rather than my 5 most favorite. But he was always trying to explore and to do new things and to see what he could do. So he was willing to progress the character. We've said that in ways that Lee Falk probably never tried to or was never ambitious to do. Sometimes you might have said, oh, well, he plays with the lore and he toys with it a little too much. I hated all of the stories that were set prior to Christopher Standish and the idea of, this Japanese potential Phantom or this Crusader Phantom or this Gladiator Phantom. I just did not like those at all. And so I would agree with you in that sense, Germ. But at least he tried. At least he had a crack and didn't die wondering. And I think it's really important. And Andreas has just let us know via another medium while we've been on the chat. Klaus, I've been recording the podcast. Klaus wrote every Phantom story that he wanted to. He finished his time with the Phantom and was very ready to hand it over. So while, and I'll say it again, at 66, gone far too soon. From a Phantom point of view, he had written everything that he wanted to write and contributed everything that he wanted to contribute. And so in terms of having an influence, I think that's fantastic. Stephen, you said before about how he has left his fingerprints all over the Phantom. I absolutely agree. I think he's left his footprints on the Phantom as well. And sometimes those have been stomping in the mud and making a mess that we didn't like. But sometimes those have been just, this is new parts of Phantom lore and we love it and we accept it. And I guess that speaks to your point, Germ, about the fans at the end of the day decide what the law is because they vote with their feet, so to speak, and what they buy and what they love. So you cannot underestimate the influence that this man has had on the character, for better or for worse, and mostly for better. There's no doubt about that. So, I've really, as I say, I've been on the record many times of disagreeing with what he's done, but I've really enjoyed this opportunity to walk down memory lane and explore his full career and see how much good there is in it, and how much better we are as a Phantom fan community for the stories that he's been able to create.
Definitely. Now, I'm glad I didn't ask you to say 2 lines.
Sorry.
But no, what you said, it's, very good. They're very good words. They're very moving words. He's dare I say, he's probably moved the Phantom more than any other creator, including Lee Falk. He's moved he's added to the Phantom. He's moved the Phantom in so many ways. He's going to leave a huge hole. We're thinking of, and our prayers are with his family, his partner, and his daughters that he's left behind, and his extended family as well. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. We're sorry that you have to go through this, and I guess just be proud that he has touched a lot of people's lives, and not just immediate family, but he's touched people's lives in all around the world. You know, there's people in Brazil, India, North America, Australia. You know, totally opposite of where he grew up. Turkey was another area. You know, going closer to home, Sweden, Norway, Finland. And Central Europe as well, like that. He has touched a lot of lives. A lot of people have read his work, have been touched by just his Phantom work. We're only talking about his Phantom work, let alone all the other stuff that he's done as well. On behalf of myself, you know, thank you, Claes Reimerthi, for what you have done. Not many people get the opportunity to leave as big as a legacy as you have, and you have. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, Mikael. Thank you. I know it's in the middle of the day. You've probably missed out on family activity time and stuff like that. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
No worries. So for our listeners, if you're only listening to us for the first time or not, we're ChronicleChamber.com. You can find us on our website, email, which is ChronicleChamber@gmail.com. Don't forget, if you have some contributions to a memorial, that podcast or video or article that you would like to submit to us, you can get in touch with us there. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, all the various apps like Podbean, Player FM, Castbox, Listen Notes, or you can watch us on YouTube as well. Now, for myself, thank you for listening. Thank you, Claes, for your legacy. Dan, Mikael, and Stephen, thank you for joining me in this celebration of a great life. From myself, happy Phantoming.
Happy Phantoming.
Happy Phantom.
Yeah, happy Phantoming. RIP Klaus.